Everybody and their mother and their father, maybe cousins, maybe brothers, definitely sisters, are talking about Matthew Stafford's Hall of Fame chances. And everyone that I see is against it. So, first of all, why are we even talking about this so much if no one thinks he should be in? Sidebar, I think he should be in. I have a weird outlook on the Hall of Fame, but I want to make the case for Stafford. First of all, I decided to call him Matthew in the title, in the description, and then I was like, should it be Matt? And then saying Matt Stafford feels like a different guy. So that has nothing to do with anything, but, Hall of Fame of not knowing which name to use. He makes it. Also, I feel more against the Baseball Hall of Fame. I don't really have enough stock in basketball or football or definitely hockey or any other Hall of Fame there is, rock and roll even. But I think the only criteria for me to make the Hall of Fame, stats matter, obviously. People keep picking on the all-pro stuff, how he didn't make it. People say, well, he made one Pro Bowl. You can dive into the stats. We will. We'll get to that in a second. But I think more importantly, it's whether you can properly tell the story of the league throughout this time with or without that person. And this is a hard one because you definitely can tell the story of the NFL without Matthew Stafford throughout the 2010s decade and obviously into the 20s. But by that metric, you really only need Brady and Manning to tell the story. Like, even with that metric, can you tell the story of the NFL without Drew Brees? Probably. But he's obviously a Hall of Fame quarterback and won a Super Bowl to prove it. And I feel the same about Stafford pretty much. I'm not saying Stafford is the quarterback that Brees is, but I think story-wise, and whether you left him out and could accurately depict the story of the NFL throughout the time in his career, they're pretty similar in that sense. And statistically, and I haven't looked this up yet, and we will, I have this feeling that he's similar to Phillip Rivers type, who gets a lot of Hall of Fame buzz in his own right, but also didn't end up winning, and actually choked a bunch when they could have won and had really good teams. So Stafford probably has the stats. Stafford has the ring. And just because he's buried under all of these elite other quarterbacks, we feel like he can't make it. And I think that's foolish. And I want to explain why. I was really surprised to look up which quarterbacks were in the Hall of Fame, and it's only 26. Initially, I thought that number was wildly low. But now that I think about it, quarterbacks haven't been elite for that long, right? So you look at this list: Aikman, Blanda, Bradshaw, Dawson, Elway, Favre, Fouts, Otto Graham, Bob Greasy, Sonny Jurgensen, Jim Kelly, Bobby Lane, Peyton Manning, Dan Marino, Joe Montana, Warren Moon, Joe Namath, Ken Stabler, Bart Starr, Roger Staubach, Fran Tarkenton, Y.E. Tittle, Johnny Unitas, Norm Van Brocklin, Kurt Warner, Bob Waterfield, and last on the list, but not least, unless you're going in alphabetical order, Steve Young. That's it. Now, we know we have Manning, Brees, Brady, gross. I don't know, a million that I'm forgetting. Rodgers will make it. I'm not going to go through and list literally all of them, but then you have the Eli Mannings, the Ben Roethlisbergers. They will both make it. The Rivers is on the fence. And then you're in Stafford territory. And then you get to the next generation. He is a weird in-between like this old guard Brady Manning era and new guard Mahomes and even Russell Wilson. I put in the new guard, even though they're, I guess, similar timelines. Regardless, my point here is there are going to be more quarterbacks, exponentially more quarterbacks, entering the Hall of Fame than there were before, because the sport has changed so much that quarterbacks are more important than they ever were. Again, to accurately tell the story of the Hall of Fame, you need more quarterbacks from this era because there were more good ones. So we can't just take this, well, this many quarterbacks made it in this decade, and this many made it in this decade, which I've heard people do, and it's nonsensical. Because the same way the goalposts move with statistics, before a 4,000-yard season was really good. Now, it's very pedestrian. Now, a 5,000-yard season is good. I'm sure eventually there will be a lot more 5,000-yard passers, and we'll have to move the goalposts on that too. Same thing. We have to let in more people from this era than we did before. It's just natural. So going back and comparing him to Elway doesn't do anything for anybody. And comparing it to the 90s or even the 2000s is hard to do. Like, how many quarterbacks do we have in from the 2000s so far? Aikman played to 2000. Favre. Is that it? Probably, because there's longevity going on now. Warren Moon played into the 2000s. Oh, Kurt Warner. So we don't know yet, right? Like, we haven't gotten there yet. And there's a real world where in the 2000s it explodes and there's twice as many quarterbacks from that decade as there are the ones before it. And then the 2010s is going to be a lot more. So there's going to be more people in. We don't have to just draw the line somewhere because we did it before. I hate when baseball does that. They're like, oh, well, this guy didn't get unanimous voting, so we can't do it for this one. It's like, who gives a shit? It's not the time that it was before. Judge it based on the time that we're in. Okay, so there you go. I'm ignoring all the people that are in the Hall of Fame now because I think it's the parameters to get in always change, right? So that argument, to me, out the window. Let's look at his stats. We start in 2011, really. I mean, he played in 2009. He was a rookie. He struggled. Everybody struggles. 2010, he got hurt. 2011, he comes back, wins Comeback Player of the Year, and dominates to the tune of 5,000 plus passing yards. Okay? Completion percentage, up and down, but 63 is fine. It's not elite. He's going to end up with 50,000 plus passing yards, probably way more than that. He's already over 300 touchdowns. His interception percentage is fine. His yards per attempt over 7, and we're 8.1 this year. One of his best, and are only going to get better with the team that he has if he can stay healthy. Quarterback rating is good. And this is all on terrible teams, right? But let's look back. 2011, he threw for 5,000 yards. Let's find the 5,000-yard passers in the league, right? Here's the list, and it's short. Marino, Breeze twice, Brady, Breeze a third time. Breeze did it 5 times, which is ridiculous. Of course, he's, as I mentioned before, of course he's a Hall of Famer. And then Brady did it twice, Stafford once, Manning once, Mahomes once, Jameis Winston, Herbert did it this year. But who did it as far back as Stafford did? It's really, I mean, Marino is a freak, obviously, and he's in the Hall of Fame. Breeze, Hall of Famer. Brady, Hall of Famer. Stafford, we're talking about it. Manning, Hall of Famer. Roethlisberger, Hall of Famer. Mahomes will be a Hall of Famer. Jameis Winston is the outlier, but that was a ridiculous fun season, but whatever. And it was 2019. Brady, Hall of Fame, and Herbert is too new. So you throw out the Winston and Herbert stuff because after 2020, all bets are off. 5,000-yard seasons might become more pedestrian, like we said. But in 2011, only truly elite players were throwing for 5,000 yards. Okay? So, feather in the cap. Put it in. Now, all-time passing yards leaders. And yards aren't everything, but they matter. Stafford is already 12th. He will pass Elway. Could pass Rodgers, although Rodgers still has some years ahead of him. So does Stafford. Matt Ryan is up there. That's a whole other Hall of Fame debate. I do think Stafford is a better quarterback than Matt Ryan. I don't care about the accolades and the Pro Bowls and the All-Pros, honestly. I think Stafford has done better with worse teams and gotten further, obviously. And I think Stafford, you know, gun to head, I'm taking Stafford over Matt Ryan. I mean, one can play in the red zone and one can't. I don't know who would feel opposite. Marino, Rivers, all these guys could get passed by Stafford for sure. He could play another how many years? He's 33. He's got another 5 years in him. And he averages, let's call it, you know, just for rough math, let's say 4,000 yards per season more, but it's going to be more than that. That's another 20K. So he could get to 70. He really could get to 70, which would put him in the top 5 all time. Next to Brady, Breeze, Manning, Favre, Roethlisberger, all of which are Hall of Famers. Rivers is on the fence, and then Marino. So he's obviously statistically in elite territory. And that matters way more to me than number of times he was chosen for an all-pro team, because only so many quarterbacks get picked for the All-Pro team, and he had to compete with these guys. Just because he wasn't better than Brady, Manning, and Breeze doesn't mean he's not a Hall of Fame quarterback. Same for Roethlisberger even. And it's the same argument people use for Rivers wanting to get in. Let's look at Rivers' stats. We'll go side by side. He has never thrown for 5,000 yards. How many times has he thrown for 30 touchdowns in a season? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many times is Stafford? Not as many, but not as many years either. 1, 2, 3. But could continue to do it for sure because he's 13 years in and Rivers played for 17 years. So, interceptions stayed pretty much down. Rivers has 209. Stafford has 161. Those will probably end up pretty close to one another. Completion percentage 64.9. Completion percentage 63. I think these are reasonable comparisons. Yards per attempt 7.3. Rivers 7.7, right? And I still think Stafford's numbers are going up, by the way, unless he gets hurt. And he's on a better team now. Quarterback rating, 91.1, 95.2. Rivers barely edging him in a lot of these things. So he has a lot more Pro Bowls. He got MVP votes. Big fucking deal. That's only compared to your contemporaries, right? Which is what the Hall of Fame is based on. I acknowledge that you need to be one of the better quarterbacks of the era, but obviously he is. We're talking about him in these metrics. And if he's comparable to Rivers at all, and even if you shave out 5% statistically, which it seems like we're doing, which I'm fine with, Rivers is a notorious failure in the postseason. So, like, that has to matter a lot. A lot. Stafford got to the mountaintop. Number 1 pick. Took a long time, played on bad teams, eventually got to the team where everyone was like, okay, now there's no excuse. And guess what he did? He won. It's like when a team wins by 20, but they should have won by 30. And you're like, oh, well, all they did was beat up on a bad team. Who cares? It's like, well, yeah, you want the good team to beat up on the bad team, and that's exactly what they did. So now you're going to criticize them for it? Matt Stafford goes to a stacked team. You think, well, he better win a Super Bowl if he goes here, or at least get far enough to compete for one. He wins the Super Bowl, and now you're like, yeah, but he had a stacked team. Like, well, that's all you wanted him to do. And that's what he did. So I feel like his success now in the postseason elevates him past Rivers, even with a 5% dip in stats. So if we're even talking about Rivers potentially making the Hall of Fame, Stafford has to be in to me. So that's one argument. Put that stat aside for now. All-time passing yards, put it aside. Single season passing. 2011, Stafford was 3rd. 2012, he's 2nd. Top 3 again in 13. Top 10 in 14. Top 10 in 15. 6th in 16, 3rd again in 17. Tough year here in 2018. I mean, on awful teams, though, which has to matter. Stafford. And then, again, I mean, just absolutely brutal teams he's working through. 2020. But then 2021, he's right back in 3rd. It must matter that he played on these terrible teams, right? Like, that has to be taken into consideration. Nobody on any of these lists, Rivers included, all these guys, none of them played with worse talent around them than Matt Stafford. And the fact that he didn't drag Detroit to a Super Bowl can't possibly be held against him. The fact that they went 10-6, 11-5, 9-7, 9-7 is insane to begin with. These teams are really bad. But let me get to the real argument that I have that I think puts it over the top. Because all this stuff is arguable. We're arguing semantics here. I think I've put him in the conversation fairly, and I think everyone acknowledges that. But here's the real crux. He was Calvin Johnson's quarterback for Calvin's whole prime. Calvin Johnson's one of the best receivers ever, including some of the best single seasons that a receiver has ever had. Probably I mean, this 2012 season, the touchdowns may not have been there. Maybe you prefer the 2011 season. I don't know. But either way, this back-to-back years of 3,500 yards and 21 touchdowns and over 200 catches in a 2-year span is so ridiculous. He was an all-pro, first-team all-pro twice, second-team all-pro. You don't get great receiver seasons, like all-time great, generally without having an all-time great quarterback. Same can be said for Cooper Kupp. This was one of the best receiving seasons ever. Almost 2,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, 145 catches. He's done this twice now on 2 different teams with 2 different receivers and turned them into the best receiver in the league, and not only the best receiver in the league, but one of the best of all time. The quarterback deserves respect for that. I looked up the best receiver seasons ever, and it's ambiguous, right? But I came down to this, and hopefully you can see it. Number 1, Randy Moss, 2007, Brady. Number 2, Jerry Rice, 1987, Montana. Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, we had that conversation. I'm not going to do a Matt Ryan spiel now, but he's obviously in the conversation. Even if you leave him out, it's still most of these guys have it. Antonio Brown, 2015, Roethlisberger, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Calvin Johnson, 2012, that's what we're talking about. Don Hudson, 1942, too long ago. They were using tailbacks to throw to him. That guy, honestly, unbelievable. Go to Don Hudson stats. You ever want fun? I'm not going to go through it now. Ridiculous, that guy. Back-to-back years, 41 and 42. He was really, truly elite. Curly Lambeau was the coach there, by the way. Michael Thomas, 2019, Drew Brees, Hall of Fame quarterback. Marvin Harrison, 2002, Indianapolis Colts, Peyton Manning, Hall of Fame quarterback. Isaac Bruce, 1996, Kurt Warner, Hall of Fame quarterback. Mark Clayton, 1984, Dan Marino, Hall of Fame quarterback. So, on this list will be Cooper Kupp. Stafford will have 2 different receivers on this list. No other Hall of Fame quarterback has done it for 2 different receivers and gotten them top 10 seasons. I'm sure there are a couple that are arguable top 20 season, whatever. The point remains, the fact that he has done this with 2 different guys is truly insane. And there you go. All-time single season yardage for a receiver, both Stafford guys, 1 and 2. This has to matter. It has to. So what if he's not spreading the ball around like Tom Brady? He is... This might be hyperbole, but statistically, he is unequivocally the best quarterback at singling out a receiver and having that receiver completely dominate. The receiver obviously also deserves the credit. I'm not saying that Stafford could do this with anyone. He didn't do it with Roy Williams. I don't know if Roy Williams played much with Stafford, but also Roy Williams was really good. Point remains, this is an insane feat that we have to acknowledge. And I go back, all the way back to 15 minutes ago, the beginning of this show. We want to tell the story of elite football play throughout the era where that player played to discuss whether they should make the Hall of Fame or not. A lot of Italian movements here for me. You can't tell the story of Calvin Johnson and Cooper Kupp, 2 of the best receivers of all time. Yeah, I'm willing to say that for Kupp, by the way. I don't know if that's hyperbole, but I don't care. This is one of the best receiver seasons of all time, at the very least. You can't tell their stories without Stafford, so no matter what, to tell that accurately, he needs to be there, right? It's the same as Sean Alexander. I don't know why this popped into my head, but whatever. Is he going to be a Hall of Fame? Nominated, hasn't made it. Some people calling him a snub. To me, I think Sean Alexander should be in the Hall of Fame because he had that one season, which was absolutely bananas, 27 touchdowns, 1,880 yards, and an MVP. That season is so ridiculous that you cannot tell the story of running backs without that season acknowledged in the Hall of Fame. And because of that, while he tailed off right after that, literally, and had a short career, although his peak was ridiculous, 14-16, 14-16, 27 touchdowns. I mean, come on. I think this kind of player should be in the Hall of Fame because when I go to the Hall of Fame and I bring my future kid there, hopefully, or anybody does, You want to go back and say, you want to see the best running back season I've ever seen? Boom. It's a museum of the sport. Without this season being told in that museum, there is an incomplete running back story in Canton, which is wrong. Without Calvin Johnson and Cooper Kupp's receiving stats being in there, I think both of them should be Hall of Famers for this reason, there is an incomplete story of the wide receiver story throughout that time in the football, right? So I have to feel the same way about Stafford. Because you can't tell the Cooper Kupp Calvin Johnson story without Stafford. If it was just one of those guys, I would take some points away. But since it's two and no other quarterback has been able to do that, I think that counts. It counts for something. And since he's so on the border statistically and winning-wise and blah, 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 that pushes him way over the top to me. These guys have to matter. Their stories need to be told. And the three of them, Stafford, Calvin Johnson, and Kupp, their stories are intertwined, and they have to be. And all three of them should be in the Hall of Fame. You could put a little section for just the three of them. That would be an interesting room in the Hall of Fame. Imagine that. So now we're talking about whether the guy should even get in, and I'm trying to build them their own room to tell this story, or at least a plaque with the three of them on it, or something. They're linked. This is an interesting link. It has to matter. And whether these stats get blown away eventually by 2,000-yard guys and receivers, fine. It might happen. I don't know. But for right this moment, when we're talking about this, he has the number 1 and number 2 receivers. Come on. Come on. You got to think that matters. I have to. And then you go on to think, well, this team's really good. They could win another one, and then this all goes away, right? Or Stafford could have 5 more. We're not putting him in today. His career's not over. I'm concerned about the back and arm issues and the health with him, but he's a warrior and always has been. The guy didn't miss a game forever. Between 2011 and 2018, he didn't miss a game. That counts too. Iron Man streak. I mean, Eli Manning gets talked about for that. His was longer, but still. I just think it's an interesting story. I think it's a really good story that should be told in the Hall of Fame. The story of being drafted to a team that never had a chance to win, dragging them to the playoffs, failing, having the elite receiver who retires early because he can't take the losing anymore, finally getting to a point where he can leave, go to a good team in LA, bright spotlight, first year there, super team. He leads them to the Super Bowl, wins the Super Bowl, has an unbelievable drive in the fourth quarter to go down and win that Super Bowl, the no-look pass. All of this stuff is part of the same story, which is captivating. Combine that with the receivers. I want to be able to walk into Canton and hear the Matthew Stafford story. And that's all that counts. That's all this place needs to be, is a story of the sport. And his story belongs, and it's intertwined with 2 of the best receivers ever, and I don't see how you can leave him out. It would be an incomplete telling. Big deal that he never made an all-pro team. I don't care. So what that he wasn't as good as Tom Brady? I don't care. Those aren't the only credentials. So what? Okay, he's 1 out of 26 quarterbacks that are in the NFL. Is he better than all 26 of those quarterbacks? No. Is he the worst one of those 26? I don't know. Maybe. That doesn't matter to me. Those can't be the criteria. The criteria have to change. So if you don't think he should be in, let me know why. And if it's just because of statistics and lack of places on a list, I won't agree with you, but I acknowledge that that's how some people feel. Either way, let me know. Put it in the comments of this video. Like the video, share it, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your mom. But I'm curious. Post it at Mike Mush Sports on Twitter and Instagram. Let me know what you think. I don't know. This is just my opinion. I have a weird view on the Hall of Fame. I just want it to be this holistic storytelling of the sport. I don't think that's a crazy take, and I don't think you could do it without Matthew Stafford. I think he belongs. I'll leave it there. Let me know what you think. Put